Hi everyone, welcome to a conversation among friends with Yenn Purkis and myself. I'm Chris. I'm very lucky to be founder and chief enabling officer of ICANN Network. I'm also very proudly autistic. Yenn Purkis is also autistic, and we're here talking about the world of work. ICANN Network has been very lucky to partner with the National Disability Insurance Scheme to deliver a school leaver storytelling series where 10 autistic young people talked about their preparedness for work and talked about their transitions, whether to casual work whilst they were in upper high school or casual work following their departure from high school. ICANN Network is very lucky to employ 38 autistic adults working to mentor 1,500 autistic young people nationally. And we've been so blessed in our journey to work with Yenn. I first met Yenn around 2015, and Yenn has made an extraordinary contribution to the equity of autistic people worldwide. Yenn is an author, an autistic advocate, a public servant, has written several books, and has an incredible TED Talk, which is featured around really featured around employment. And there's a book in particular about aspartines and the world of work that Yenn has authored. So we are so lucky to have Yenn with us today. I just want to lastly acknowledge these are very challenging times. So we will be focused as much as we can on the context of COVID-19 and how that can be, I guess, a bit of a backdrop as we talk about work, because I think it's going to change work, I would argue, for the better. So we'll leave it there. But now I'm going to invite Yenn to share some reflections. Thank you again for joining us, Yenn.
Oh, thank you for having me, Chris. I always love doing things with the ICANN network because you do such incredible work. And I actually put on Facebook that I'd be doing some work with the ICANN network. And I said, I wish we had it when I was a kid. And I really do. But I'm so glad for kids today that they have access to the ICANN network, because I think it's fantastic. And it's just a great initiative that makes a huge amount of difference.
Thanks.
And for a lot of autistic people, getting into the workplace and staying employed is a real challenge. I actually do have a book that I wrote a few years ago called The Wonderful World of Work, a handbook for aspartines. Is it a handbook? It's a workbook. And that's all for people like you, school leavers, teens on the spectrum, to have some knowledge and understanding and some strategies for managing in the workplace, because we need all the help we can get. The workplace is not always very autism friendly, even now. So it is a bit of a challenge.
Okay, Yenn, why does work matter? What is great about having a job?
There's lots of reasons that work matters, and there's lots of reasons that it's great to have a job. The most obvious one is you get paid. Getting paid is a good thing. Money enables you to do things. It gives you choices. Don't have money, you don't have choices. So an income is a great thing. And it's nice to have money as well. You can buy stuff that you like. So that's the one big glaring obvious benefit of work, and it's why most people go to work. But there's a whole bunch of other elements of work that are really rewarding. So it gives you a sense of purpose. You're actually part of something.
Yes.
You're part of something bigger than you.
Yes.
And that's fantastic. And I find, I work in the public service, but I also work as an autism advocate. And that gives me such a rewarding sense of making a difference in the world. And it's great. If you can have a job that makes you feel part of something bigger and that you belong, that's fantastic. Your work can relate to your interests. A lot of autistic people have passions and interests and things they love. And if you're really lucky, you can get a job in the space of what you love, which is fantastic and gives you a lot of meaning in life. It also shatters the assumptions and stereotypes about being autistic, because I remember once I was at a conference, I was speaking at a conference, and I was a little overwhelmed, so I went to the quiet room, which wasn't very quiet because it was filled with non-autistic conference organisers. So I ended up having this conversation with mostly women. And along the lines of this conversation, one of them said, "So, do you live at home with your mummy?" Now, I was 30, maybe 40 at that point. And I said, "No, I live in an apartment that I own that I'm paying off with the proceeds of my professional job." So I absolutely shattered their unhelpful assumptions around autism. And there are a lot of unhelpful assumptions around autism and around the capability of autistic people, or not, as the case may be. So it's really nice having a job. No one's going to put you in that pigeonhole of, that you're dependent and all of these things, which aren't really very helpful things to think about anybody. But I think we do have these levelled at us, this idea that we're not capable of anything much. That's not to say that you have to work in order to be a valuable person, because you don't. But work is a very good thing to do. And if you can work, I always think if you can work, you should be able to work, because it makes such a difference.
So thanks heaps, Yenn. That's very helpful. How do you position yourself to get a job? If you look back on your journey, you shared at the beginning that life hadn't always been easy. How did you position yourself to get a job, and what insights from that can help others position themselves?
I have a journey of employment, because when I was 27, I'd been outside of the workforce for many years, and I was not in a very good space in terms of my mental health, but I was determined to get a job. And so I got a job washing dishes at a restaurant, which wasn't particularly responsible in the scheme of things. I mean, there was me, and then there was a brain surgeon, quite a gap between those points. But I was so anxious about this dishwashing job. And every time I go to work, my anxiety would be like this. I'm absolutely terrified, and I'd be so anxious. And I'd do my shift, and I'd be sitting there, and I'd be repeating things in my mind, like song lyrics and stuff, because I was so stressed. And I ended up getting really unwell with mental health issues and had to quit the job. And at that point, I didn't think I'll never be able to work. I thought, I can't work now, but I want to be able to work. So I, over the next few years, incrementally put in place more and more challenging work-related activities. And this went on for several years. Everything was really anxiety-provoking, but I'd do it and I'd challenge myself, and I'd get past that. And then in 2007, I got a professional job in the public service, which was, there was quite a gap between not being able to do a dishwashing job because I was so stressed, to working in a government role, which actually was quite responsible. But that period of preparation was really important. So preparation is really important. Doing work activities is great. So if you can volunteer, or if you can, do work trials, work experience, that's fantastic. Learning skills from your interests. So if you've got a range of passions or interests or things like that, utilize that to build your skills in the workplace. Things like IT skills, or writing, or graphic design, video production, anything like that, events management, things that you do from your passion. Just do that with a view to finding work. Fostering a sense of pride in who you are. If you like and value yourself, the workplace will be a lot easier to navigate. Practicing things like interviews, and interviews are dreadful. Autistic people don't generally enjoy job interviews. They're not something we are particularly keen on, but sadly for a lot of roles they're necessary. So practicing with a parent or friend or someone like that, the kinds of questions you might be asked, and just that situation of being asked questions by a panel. Prepare your CV, and you can talk to a parent or a support person about how to do that. Or you can buy my book, The Wonderful World of Work, which has a whole load of good information about CVs, but you don't have to. I won't be sad if you don't. And of course, now where a lot of people are in quarantine and isolation with COVID-19, and that can make it very hard to find a job. And the economy has taken a bit of a hit with COVID. So being mindful of that. And so work out what you enjoy doing and the kinds of jobs you might like to do, and practice preparing a CV or practice interviews or thinking about the kinds of roles you might like, so that you can do that preparation. So when quarantine finishes and when everything's resolved, you'll be in a really strong position to get a job, because it is quite difficult at the moment, especially for people in Victoria and parts of Sydney, and it's scary times, but we can use that time to help build our confidence and knowledge for the workplace. And I think, as Chris was saying, there are some positives about working remotely, and a lot of autistic people actually really prefer to work remotely.
Yes.
So that is a bit of a plus too, and just seeing a positive within a difficult situation.
Absolutely. Yenn, so for our listeners hearing your story, you've started at 27, doing dishes, and now you're in the Australian Public Service, at the epicentre of Australian Public Service in Canberra, and you've held a job for a long time. You're paying off mortgages, so you've been very successful. I hope you don't mind me saying you have been very successful. So how do you stay in a job? Because you've clearly retained work well, but that is, that's easier said than done. How do you stay in a job?
That's a really good question, and that's a really tricky one for a lot of autistic people. You find there's two things that autistic people struggle with in the workplace. One is job interviews, and the other one is job retention, so staying in the role, because it can be quite confusing to be in the workforce. There's often a lot of unwritten rules, social rules that everyone else seems to know instinctively and we don't. So it can be quite a challenge. One thing I would say is to know that your first job is unlikely to be your dream job. So I have my dream job now. I've had it since last year. And before that, I had some other nice jobs, but I'm actually at 46. I'm in a role which is perfect for me. I work in human resources in diversity and inclusion. So
perfect for you. Oh my gosh.
Lovely. But
yeah, that's perfect. Sorry, it's your moment, but that is perfect for you.
I'm really good at it, as one
Right.
would expect for an autism advocate. I know a little bit about diversity.
Wow.
It's taken me very many years to get to that dream job. And that doesn't mean I hated my jobs before then, but it took me a long time to get to the one where I go, this is the fit, this is the right role for me.
Yes.
So just be aware of that. Your first job is not likely to be your dream job. And you also can have a job that you don't like very much, but then your attitudes towards it change for a number of different reasons. So just being aware of that, and that work is a journey, and it can take a while to get to a place where it's a great fit. Use your first and subsequent jobs to build your skills and knowledge so that you will be able to get your dream job one day. If it's out there for you, puts you in a position to actually find that. When you're at work, access whatever support you need that's available. We have human resources departments, we have employment assistance providers, which is like psychologists in the workforce. You might want to talk to your manager about things. Just be aware there is support out there, and to access it if you need to. Think about jobs through one of those autism and employment things, like Specialistern is one of them, and the Dandelion program is another, and they're companies that exclusively hire autistic talent, and they come from the basis and the view that autistic people have a lot of skills to offer in the workplace. And some of the skills autistic people do tend to have are things like attention to detail, a very low tolerance of errors, a sense of enthusiasm and a work ethic, loyalty, and a different approach. So we actually have a lot to offer the corporate world. And being aware of that is really a good thing. Work out what you want to do around disclosure. And by disclosure, I mean talking about your autism in the workplace. Not everyone discloses. Some autistic people do not disclose at work for a variety of reasons. I tend to find in my own experience that when I disclose, it does make it a bit easier. You always get someone who's a bit bigoted though. There's always going to be someone who goes, I don't know about that autistic staff member. But in my experience, and I am speaking personally, and everyone's experience of this is different, but in my experience, things have worked out better when I have disclosed. And with disclosure, I always suggest having a strategy. So before you go for a job, work out what you're thinking of doing around disclosure. You can change it, but just have in your mind consideration about disclosure. And there's a few different questions to ask. When, whether you disclose at all, when, at what point in the process do you do, when you apply or interview or when you first get the job, what you say and how much you say. You do not have to say anything if your autism doesn't stop you from doing the inherent requirements of the job. So that's the generic disability disclosure, is if you can't do the inherent requirements of the job, then that's an issue. But generally being autistic is not going to stop you from doing the inherent job.
Yeah.
But you don't have to disclose, but I would say have a strategy around it, give it some consideration. Promote your qualities to your managers and have a really positive sense of what you're doing well. What I did when I first started in the public service was every time I did a new piece of work, I'd put it in a document so that when I wanted to have a performance discussion or if I went for promotion, I've got a list of all these things that I've done. And I found that really helpful. And
that's a great strategy.
Yeah, it's a really useful thing. The other thing is, if things are difficult, if you have a colleague or a manager who's a bully, or if things are going wrong, speak up about it. Don't suffer in silence. I've had managers over the years in different roles who've been really difficult, and the best thing you can do is actually do something about it, which often involves talking to their manager or something like that. It's a pretty fraught area. It's quite difficult, and hopefully you won't come across that as a problem. But I've found in my experience, if somebody is being difficult, they need to be held accountable for that. And then just be positive about who you are and what your skills are. As autistic people, we often get told that, or we can't do anything, or, all this deficit thinking and negative thinking about autism and autistic people. And I would say try and have a sense of pride in yourself and not worry about those negative perceptions, and instead see your qualities, your positive qualities, your attributes that are really good, and see yourself as an asset to the workplace. And that makes things a lot easier.
Fantastic reflections, Yenn. Really, really practical. You can watch this recording again to hear those notes. I haven't been employed for as long as Yenn, but there's wisdom for life in there. Yeah, that was sensational. Well, I'm going to reflect now. I hope it's, adds value to what Yenn has shared. I guess from my perspective, I'm very lucky to be an employer of autistics and an autistic myself. So I guess that gives me some insights to talk about how you might target the right workplace and what to look for, so that you do land a job where you feel safe and comfortable and where you feel secure to take some risks to grow your skill set and ultimately grow your career. I would really, just to follow on exactly what from Yenn said, know your worth. You've got, make sure you are surrounding yourself by people before you interview or before you're assessed or screened, for lack of a better word, who remind you of your great skills. That is so important, that you feel upbeat about your strengths, and that you're going into the interview with some positive self-esteem. Can I share one story? I'm going to have to use the words the individual, because that's what I've got consent to share. But of my autistic staff, I want to talk about one staff member in particular. I've learned more from this individual. I've learned as much from this individual as I've probably learned from my parents and my grandparents. And sometimes I get quite emotional about talking about this individual, because this person has expanded my idea of what humans can do. This individual was very, very involved in the early phase of ICANN network, and this staff member just personified all the qualities and traits of autism that Yenn was speaking about earlier. An extraordinary attention to detail, frustration with errors, and a terrific truthfulness about errors, and an amazing focus and a great loyalty. And to give one example, there was a moment where in our early phase as a business, we weren't very good with our financial reporting. This is kind of back in 2014 when we were 1 year old. And this person was so frustrated with our gap in our skills here that the individual borrowed a book on Year 12 accounting and learnt accounting in 3 weeks. And this staff member rocked up to a meeting where, we were checking in, how do we improve our skills here? And the individual brought out a budget and had organised all of ICANN's finances. And I remember looking at this person gobsmacked, and I said, how have you learnt this? Like, this individual had produced a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. And the individual said, I just borrowed a book on Year 12 accounting and learnt what to do. And everyone was just awestruck. And I'll never forget it because it just showed when you can customize a job that leverages the great skills of an autistic employee with a business need, magic happens. So if you are connected to a business leader and you're watching this call, never underestimate what an autistic person can do when they're motivated and when they are given space. That's really important, when they're given space to bring their great focus and memory and their critical eye and different listening and concentration skills, when they can apply that to a business problem. Because that's just, this person continues to work for ICANN Network. The individual is not just great with the output, but the individual is also enormously important to our culture. People that work with this person are better people, they are better colleagues, and they're better in teams, because the person is always has so much integrity, so much honesty, and is always completely about the interests of autistic people and the interests of the company, that it's never in question that there's any ego involved or, anything but a pure, proper purpose that is focused on the company. So that just means that everything this individual touches improves. So I could speak about the person forever, but I'm just so proud to work with this person. So lessons learnt from building and nurturing a neurodiverse team. If you're out there and listening, look for an organisation that is flexible and shows you that flexibility. Flexibility is a word that's thrown around, but you are looking for a place that makes you feel safe. And I don't necessarily mean physically safe, I mean emotionally safe. People who you can imagine yourself potentially disclosing your autism to. I'm not saying, I'm not pressuring you. I think Yenn has explained that beautifully. Have a strategy if you feel ready and you want to. And in my experience, I agree with Yenn. It has been better for me when I've disclosed it to people. The second thing would be to self-advocate and to perhaps have up your sleeve some scripts like support requirements you might have. So for instance, you could identify with your manager an optimal time of day that you're really high performing, or examples in team meetings where you might need a little bit more detail to contribute. For instance, sometimes it's very typical for a supervisor or a manager to ask someone, what's your view? And sometimes you might be someone that needs a few more sub-prompts underneath that quite vague prompt to be able to contribute all the technical knowledge you might have on that topic. And that connects with the third insight I would share, which is identify your communication preferences. Communication is really important in a workplace. And so it's handy if you can identify how you are with phone calls or email or SMS, and what are the communication preferences that you really grip and that stick to you, that your manager can be equipped with, and probably if you're in a team that you can equip your colleagues with, so that they know how to send important messages to you and how you give information. I think that's really important. And that's been especially important in COVID-19 when all of us are working remotely. I Can Network, everyone works remotely. So the 50 staff are working from home. So we use email, we use Zoom, we use Slack. Every workplace has different forums that they use. Those work for us. The next thing I would say is it's handy to identify release valves if you are experiencing some frustration or heightened emotions about changes at work. So Yenn has already identified this with human resources team or the employee assistance programs. Sometimes a release valve might also just be a colleague who's, someone, that you can grab a tea or coffee with, or, someone who you feel quite comfortable with, to workshop and share how you're feeling about a change that might have been made at work, a change in structure, or something that has needed to be put in place. Change is inevitable. As an employer, you never like bringing changes in place, but the world is always changing and businesses need to change around that changing world. So, living with change is an important reality, and it can help you to identify some safe release valves so you can workshop, how should I articulate this to my boss, or, making sure that you can maybe having that release valve that you can do the quiet vent to without doing it in a public forum, which you might later regret. And then the other one would be embracing feedback. Sometimes autistic people can take things very personally. I can sometimes take things extremely personally. And so it's really helpful if you just kind of cut yourself some slack and go, this person's giving me feedback. It's not deep feedback that I need to have, printed on my forehead. It's just feedback. It might be really little tweaks that I can make in my everyday. So don't take it personally, just kind of act on it, implement what you can. Equally, normally feedback is a two-way process. So give feedback yourself in a safe way. But that's something that's going to help you. And then lastly, it's, I guess, invest in your colleagues. I had a manager who once gave me feedback saying, Chris, you're very single-minded and very focused on the goals that you feel are important. But remember, all of us have goals. All of us have objectives that we're trying to meet. And sometimes we need things from you to help us with our goals. So whilst your single-mindedness is very effective for your goals, you also need to think about, how you are as a colleague with others. And it was helpful advice because it helped me go, yeah, the world is bigger than me. I've got this great focus on my objectives, but I also need to support my wider team. So, and that can be, having that enormous concentration that you have on your objectives and then broadening your mind to think about the rest of the team. Sometimes that can be quite tiring because your brain is already working sometimes in a quicker way than the more neurotypical brain on your objectives, you also need to consider, how do I support everyone else that needs things from me? So I guess to help you achieve that and to be a good team player, it's also about identifying some downtime where you can just collapse a bit and unwind if you find all of that extra concentration a bit draining. Friday night, I'm a bit of a waste of space. I'm exhausted. Saturday, I normally have a nap, would be my confession. Like I'm a bit drained from the week, but that works. I need that downtime, and you need to identify the downtime you need as well. And then lastly, advice for parents and carers who are out there, as much as possible, you know, I guess build up self-esteem, build up the positivity of the autistic person who is in your life. Ensure that he, she, or they are feeling your support and your love, and that before big risks they might be taking, such as interviews, that they feel your support 100%. And just ensure that the person is also following their interests. One thing about iCare Network in the beginning, when I was, it's taken a long time to get to 38 staff, and over the 7 years that iCare Network's been in business, we've had 60 autistic staff along that journey. There were a lot of autistic people in jobs at the beginning that did not suit them. And there were moments where I just had to be, probably a little bit plucky and say to people, hey, why are you doing that? I think you should be a mentor. I just had to say it at some points, because there were moments when I would meet people who were doing some course because, someone influential in their life was worried that things wouldn't work out. And so they said, why don't you do this? And they ended up being pretty disappointed with it. So follow your interests. And if you're a parent or carer, make sure that, you're kind of empowering that person to keep following those interests, because that's so important. So I will leave it there. I guess some final words from Yenn and I. We really want to encourage whoever is listening, if you are feeling a little bit depressed or disappointed with any recent results you might have had in a job interview or at work itself, we would just really encourage you. It does get better. You do meet great people. You do build networks. It's just sometimes taking risks and keep putting yourself out there, because I know from all the people I've been lucky to employ, when you find the right job and the sense of purpose, especially when it leverages your motivation, it's just, for an autistic person, that's how you tick. And that's just a terrific, life-giving feeling when a job is good. Do you have any final words, Yenn?
I would echo what you just said, and I think also say to you, we do have amazing capability, and we have a lot to offer the world of work. And just be proud of who you are, and recognise that you've got lots to give and lots to offer. And as a fellow autistic person, I have got to a point where I love my job. I love what I do. It's just a privilege to get to do it, and it can happen for you too, absolutely. And just remember how much you've got to give a workplace, and just remind yourself that you're awesome every day.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you, Yenn. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to the NDIS for sponsoring our School Leaver series. We will leave it there. Please stay connected to our newsletter and our Facebook.